Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 56, Hope. As the game opens, the party is laser focused on harvesting whatever they can from the dragon's corpse. Matt tells the players that harvesting the dragon's hide is going to take a lot of time, but they are determined. They want to get the hide so they can make black dragon scale armor. Liam points out that they could have done that ages ago with the dragon scales they've already got, and besides, most of the shops that could do that sort of thing are probably destroyed, so maybe this isn't the best use of their time. But Vex doesn't care, she's got a crafting mission, and Keyleth and Percy are determined. After all, the Dragon Slayer longsword can help with the task of harvesting. Finally, there's something they can actually do with the stuff they keep harvesting from their fallen enemies. They can make armor. This is such a funny scenario, because unlike what I would imagine most D&D groups are like, Vox Machina has been harvesting blood and teeth and scales from just about every monster they've killed for at least the entirety of the streamed game. But they don't actually have any concrete ideas for what to do with them, besides the vague idea that they must be valuable to someone. Usually, I'd guess that either a D&D group has the specific goal for the stuff they harvest because they have a crafting system in their game for using monster parts to create magic items, or they just leave their enemies' bodies to rot. Vox Machina is in such a funny middle ground because they go through the legwork of harvesting after almost every monster fight, but there's no follow-through. I would guess this comes from the fact that one of their first adventures involved harvesting the skull of a nightmare and the heart of a nymph, and delivering them to Realm Seer Eskel Rindarian. Ever since then, they've known these items are worth a lot, but outside of using them in trade with a few magic item merchants, they hardly ever remember to take the time to do anything with them. Now, they did used to have a party member who did a lot of magic item crafting, but he left the campaign after episode 27, so outside of Keyleth's interest in brewing potions, they don't really know how to make their own magic items. And I also wonder if the fact that they moved over to 5e affected things as well, because if they ever do want to create their own items, the only magic item creation rules Matt can reference by this point in the campaign are the ones in the Downtime activities section of the Dungeon Master's Guide, which doesn't really come close to what his players are trying to accomplish. As they learned during Tiberius's infamous errands, creating magic items takes an awfully long time, longer than is reasonable for the pace of their campaign. But regardless, now Matt's players actually have a goal for the scales. That doesn't count for all the blood and claws and teeth they also harvest. Again, they just hope these things will be valuable. But part of the reason Vex is so gung-ho about harvesting the hide, despite Matt's indications that it will take time, is because she wants to make some badass dragon hide armor. But I think there is a lesson here. The moment your players start showing any interest in harvesting monster parts, I think you should introduce rules for using monster parts to create magic items. Don't wait for the players to take the initiative and try to create their own items, because they may not know what's possible. It might have not even occurred to them that they could do anything with the body parts of a monster. So just let them know what options are available to them. There are lots of rule resources out there to solve this dilemma. Plenty of people have made monster harvesting or monster salvage rules, and we'll make videos about some of those in the future. But players will only do something with these harvested body parts if they know there's something they can do with them. If you tell them how these monster crafting rules work, they might still never get around to doing anything with them, but at least they'll know they could do something if they wanted to. But why would you want this? Well, because it helps give players something to do with their downtime, which helps improve their investment in the game. Some players also really like the idea of crafting custom magic items, especially if they're familiar with video games that have crafting mechanics. And of course, it gives them something to do with all of their gold. And speaking of gold, they evaluate the gold in Umbrasyl's lair and realize that there is at least 78,000 gold pieces here. Now, Vex is quick to point out that most of this is Westruun's, and Matt says there's too much here for them to carry anyway, so they decide they'll let Westruun know where the gold is, and those people can come and collect it themselves. But then the party starts debating how much is reasonable for them to take off the top. Vex doesn't want to take more than is fair, she's even suggesting lower amounts than the rest of the party members are, and Vax is watching her very closely to see what she does, given her history around dragon hoards and other wealth. But almost everyone else is saying, take more, take more. They eventually compromise on 15%. Matt says, okay, that's the most Grog could put into the bag of holding anyway. Scanlan pockets a ring as well. He was specifically looking for something that looked like a wedding ring, one that would maybe fit on a smaller finger. Meanwhile, Keyleth creates a stone alcove to hide the rest of the gold from any potential robbers until the people of Westruun can come to claim it. They also look for magic items in the hoard and find a ceramic jug that has runes etched along the sides. They can hear liquid sloshing inside, but it's apparently empty. They experiment with it, they pour liquids into it, they shake it, but nothing seems to happen. They also find a bunch of empty potion bottles, which Umbrasyl used to heal up before their final battle. But they do find a potion and an oil that are still intact. They also find a tome of leadership and influence, and when they ask if Grog could read it, not that he necessarily will, but wondering if he could, Matt offers a great rationalization for how Grog could read this book, despite being canonically illiterate.
It's interesting. You look at the pages, and the lines don't make sense to you, but for some reason, you understand the gist of what the content is. It goes beyond the barrier of language, and for a second, it's almost like there are pictures, but the pictures are assembled by a bunch of tiny lines in a row in different shapes that show you what it means.
See, it's a book about leadership. Clearly, it wants to communicate something to me. And intelligence, Rob.
This is like a Grognard comic book in Fallout, is what this is.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is a stat book.
I was going to say how to win
Is it?
friends and influence people.
Matt also tells them that they could look over these items during their long rest and learn a lot more about what these items do. This is interesting because we've talked about this before. Matt is sometimes pulled between his narrative interests and the game mechanics. According to the rules, anybody can figure out what a magic item does by simply examining it over a short rest. But if that's something that everyone can do, then why would anyone take the Identify spell? In this episode, Matt allows them to figure out what magic items do over a rest, but throughout the course of the show, he'll adjust how he handles it based on the needs of the session. And while it's good to find a consistent solution, what that solution ultimately looks like will depend on your campaign and your style. Like I said, I discussed this more in this video, so check it out here. It'll be in the description as well. It can help you figure out how you might want to handle this sort of at your own tables. However, in this case, I suspect Matt has another motivation for telling the players that they can identify their magic items after a long rest, because I think he's trying to get them to go back to town. Now, we'll talk about why Matt is trying to get them back to town a little bit later in this episode, but this would definitely help explain why Matt is taking a different approach to identifying magic items in this session. Matt's players love finding narrative reasons to figure out how magic items work. For example, when they found Fastbender, Marisha took a long time to make sure that she was narratively working out exactly what Fastbender's mechanics were. When Vex got the broom, she roleplayed the experience of trying to get it to work and trying to figure out the broom's command word. Matt's players have proven that they have no issue just playing out the experience of interacting with these magic items for the first time. Maybe they really enjoy this process because it makes the game world feel more real, or maybe they just do it to avoid the perception of metagaming. Regardless, in this case, Matt says that they don't need to do any of that. They can just take a long rest and learn what these magic items do. Now, this is not the first time he's handled magic items that way. When the party was in Whitestone and they were reviewing the loot that they got from the Briarwoods, they identified their magic items through downtime over the course of a couple of days. And I think that was done for the same reason, to skip this stuff and get to the more interesting part of the session. In this case, I think Matt knows that if he plays along, if he just gives them clues and they have to narratively and diegetically figure out how these magic items work, it's gonna take time, and he wants to speed through that. Speaking of speeding through things, Keyleth and Percy keep harvesting Dragonhide before Matt finally tells them, "You're exhausted, you've got 40 pounds, but the body is starting to dissolve." This is the second time he's tried to speed through the harvesting, trying to get the players to move on from collecting the Dragonhide tonight. It seems like he's trying to get the players to move on for timing purposes, but maybe he's not phrasing it in a way where they're picking that up. When he says, "It's going to take you all night to harvest the hide," they seem to interpret that as, well, we better get moving on it then. Except I left out a detail. At the beginning of the episode, when he first told them that it would take a ton of time to harvest the hide, he said, "You're going to need a team of people and an extended period of time to do that well." Again, it's almost like he's trying to give them a reason to go back to town. But when they didn't take the hint, he instead just said, "Okay, you get a bunch of Dragonhide and then the dragon melts itself," because it's the quickest way to get them to move on from this task while still telling them that they were successful in getting a lot of Dragonhide. In fact, as the party retires to the mansion for the night, Percy goes to repair his gun and Matt says, "You're gonna need a workshop." Again, I think Matt is just trying to get them to go back to town. But Taliesin says, "Well, there's a workshop in the mansion, I was gonna use that." Okay, that's a reasonable plan. Scanlan has a mansion that is specifically designed to grant them whatever they need, so Matt can't just say, "Well, sure, but he didn't give you the thing that you would need to deal with one of your most obvious needs, repairing a broken gun. Sucks to suck." So at this point, he kind of takes his foot off the pedal. He's not going to get them back to town tonight. Percy repairs his gun, but again, Matt tells them that it takes a good chunk of the night, and he only regains 2 of his expended hit dice rather than recovering half of his total hit dice. That's a really interesting consequence to ask from a player, and an interesting way to reflect fatigue without dipping into 5e's very punishing exhaustion mechanic. This might offer a bigger disadvantage if they were going to find themselves in combat in the next session, but I'm pretty sure Matt knew that that was very unlikely to be the case. Oh, also, apparently Vex did not give Vax his Boots of Haste after the dragon fight. I thought he had got those back in the last episode, but in this one, Vax is demanding the boots back from Vex, but she refuses. She's being bratty, basically on purpose. This is part of their sibling dynamic. So after Percy repairs his gun, Matt starts to say, "Okay, you take your long rest without issue, but then Sam adds that Scanlan is commanding 10 spectral servants to protect Vex's feet. And then Matt laughs and turns it over to Liam and gives him the floor, because clearly this is going to be some shenanigans. Sam just extended an offer to the twins to do a scene, and Matt is going to give that the time it deserves. Vax sneaks into Vex's room, pours water and flour on her, and shouts for her to give back his boots, and then the servants tackle him. After some negotiation, Vex tries to probe a bit about Vax's relationship with Keyleth, but he really doesn't give any answers, partially because he just doesn't fully know where they stand, though he doesn't tell Vex that. Vex eventually gives the boots back and says she'll have to ask Keyleth about their relationship instead. Keyleth asks Scanlan about the hot springs mentioned in the last episode to help wash up after the dragon harvesting. When Matt describes a really awesome hot springs sauna setup, Keyleth calls out on her earrings for the ladies to join her for some girl talk, but the earrings connect to everybody, so everybody converges in the hot springs. I also really want to highlight the fact that Marisha had Keyleth willingly call the other ladies, knowing that Vex was just asking Vax about their relationship, and saying that she wanted to talk to Keyleth about that relationship. Now, Keyleth would not want to answer those sorts of questions. She has been extremely awkward whenever this topic has come up in the past. So I don't imagine that she would put herself into that situation on purpose, and instigate another one of those girl talk conversations. But Marisha isn't Keyleth, and so she does seem to embrace the scenario, or at the very least she didn't take any steps to avoid putting Keyleth into a position where she would get some uncomfortable questions about her relationship with Vax. Also, I want to address part of Matt's style that I'm not personally a huge fan of at my own tables. It works for this cast, but it is not my thing. Sometimes when a player will cast a spell that requires some sort of visual, usually one that the caster is meant to come up with, Matt will describe it for them instead.
So, the ladies, you all convene, and this beautiful hot, air filled with steam. There's a fountain in the corner with some rocks and some nice plants around the area. There's a beautiful giant portrait of Scanlan, nude, sprawled over a rock. The towel just gently placed on its knee.
Not covering anything.
No, it's decorative.
Now, I won't pretend Matt's descriptions aren't great, or even in character. After all, what Matt describes here does sound an awful lot like something Sam would have come up with. And sometimes when a player describes something, Matt just jazzes it up a bit to make it better fit into the world, like redrawing something to match the house style. I mean, that's literally what he does when his players get a "how do you want to do this?" They'll describe something, and Matt will re-describe it and add flourishes and flesh it out a bit more. But this is something that I've noticed Matt doing ever since the party cast Seeming back in the Briarwood arc. Anytime Scanlan altered the appearance of the party, Matt would describe what they looked like. Now, in that case, I can understand how that was actually beneficial to the party. The players weren't actually seeing the common people of Whitestone, but their characters were. So when Matt described the player characters' new appearances, he was better able to describe it to actually match the visuals of the town. Because it's possible Matt is imagining like the townsfolk from Witcher 3, but his players are imagining the townsfolk from a Tim Burton movie. Their descriptions of what they could look like under the illusion could potentially not match what their characters would be seeing around them, and given that they were on a mission of subterfuge, a difference like that could actually make their situation a lot worse. But here, where the situation is far more low stakes, I really think Matt should just hand the reins over to his players to give some description. They don't even need to narrate the whole thing like Matt does. He could just handle it the same way he does a "how do you want to do this?" where he would ask them for a couple of brief details, they could give some answers, and then he could flesh it all out with his preferred level of descriptions and details. Now, his players defer to him a lot in this game, and it honestly won't be until much later in the show where they might actually start to feel comfortable describing these sorts of details on their own. And that's perfectly okay too. Like, if that's what his players like, then fair enough. That's their style. But I also think it's really valuable to start handing over the reins when these spells come up, to encourage the players to describe their own visuals and help conjure their mental images into words. You shouldn't wait for the players to grab the ball and run with it. You should hold out the ball and see if they want to take it. At least, that's how I feel about it. Hopefully that made sense whether you agree with me or not. Anyway, the boys show up in the hot springs, but Vex still takes Keyleth aside for some girl talk. When asked, "Hey, what's the plan? You getting married? You having kids?" Keyleth replies that she's just so focused on the dragons and her own personal objectives and the growth she still needs to do. She also admits her reluctance to answer the question of, "Do you like Vax?" has a lot to do with Vex's extreme and emotional reactions to their earlier romantic interactions. But Vex has come around. She just wants Vax and Keyleth to be happy. But Keyleth is still looking down the road at all the potential pitfalls, like, what happens if either Vax or Vex dies? And Vex says, look, you can't worry about that stuff. Keyleth also asks a very interesting question.
My brother serves death, Keyleth. And death is a natural thing that happens with or without him.
This is true.
Do you believe in the gods? Do you believe that Vax actually serves death?
That's a really interesting question, and keep that in the back of your head for a few more weeks, because we are going to talk about the gods soon and what sort of relationship players can have with them. So the question, do you think the Raven Queen is actually really a personification of death itself, is a really fascinating one. But then we get into some more insight of Keyleth's worldview, and it's going to be important for later in this episode, so I'm going to linger on this a little bit longer.
Yes, I do. And what do you think that means for the rest of us?
I think it means that what we do has a purpose. Regardless of the outcome, there is a purpose.
You don't think we're just destroying everything everywhere we go?
No! Are you kidding? We saved an entire town today. More dragons may come, but for the time being, the people are safe. And we are safe. If we're successful, we could save this entire fucking world.
I don't know if I'm cut out to be a hero.
You already are.
I don't know about that.
Anyway. Be happy. Go to him. Just live in the moment. Don't worry about it right now.
Maybe there's another time and another place where we don't have to. But now I feel like we do.
We're in a mansion right now. Fucking cannonball! And I get up and I cannonball.
Big splash, hot water across your face.
4.5.
All right, I need
Bad
a higher.
form,
I
bad
need a
form.
broom.
Yeah.
Again, Keyleth's mindset is that they can't just live in the moment and enjoy it because there are all these unforeseen consequences to their actions. And this is something that we're going to talk about a lot more later in the episode. It's going to be a whole thing. But of course, Vex started discussing doing a cannonball from her broom, so that got the group talking about a cannonball contest. This is a great sequence, the time codes are on screen, but I'm just going to cover the highlights. Grog will judge, since it's not really fair for him to participate. The winner gets 5 pounds of gems that they found in the Hoard. On Keyleth's jump, she transforms into an earth elemental the moment she hits the water. Pike takes a traditional cannonball, but aided by her mighty gauntlets of ogre power, she makes the same level of splash as Keyleth's elemental form. Scanlan casts a thunder wave when he hits the water. Percy uses raw sodium in a method that I won't detail any further because this is full do not try this at home territory. Taliesin warns the viewers at home not to ever do this, because when Percy does it, it causes an explosion in the water, dealing damage to Percy, which he can endure because he's a 14th level fighter. Vex flies up on her broom, dives down, and releases Trinket just as she hits the water, and Vax doesn't participate because he's upstairs spreading chicken sorbet across his sister's bedsheets. Grog declares Percy the winner since he's the only one who drew blood. Now this scene reminds me so much of the moments in X-Men comics or cartoons where the team plays baseball. It's a moment that really doesn't move the story forward, but instead just allows the team to enjoy each other's company and use their powers in creative ways. It's just a moment to allow the team to be at rest and see what they do with their time when they're not in the middle of working toward solving a stressful situation. In X-Men comics, it's also a creative way for the writers to quickly introduce all of the team members' powers and personalities for a new audience member who maybe hasn't read any X-Men comics before, but that doesn't really apply to the situation we're talking about today. But this is the benefit of a downtime session, which his players clearly felt they needed. Not only does it give them the opportunity to take their time to go through the items they found in the Hoard and figure out some other logistics, many of which we'll discuss in the second part of this episode, but also it just gives them a chance to process everything they just experienced. A good analogy is the video game Hades, which is a non-stop action game during gameplay, but then whenever your character dies, you go back to the halls of Hades and you hang out with all these NPCs, and you get to actually deal with the fallout of what you've experienced and share emotional experiences with the people in your life. Arguably, that's when the story is truly moving forward. In this case, the party knows that they're not going to get anything else done during the night. They have a long rest to kill, so they're taking that opportunity to have a mini downtime session and process some of what they've been going through. For these characters, it doesn't take any time out of their schedules, but it is a way for these players to spend their session checking things off of their list and doing a bit of in-character self-care. The next morning, they start dividing up the magic items, and even though Matt allowed the players to figure out how these magic items work without the process of going through the narrative explanation in real time, Travis has thought about how Grog would have figured out what the jug did.
Well, I also went to my room and I was like, man, what I could really... And I was holding a jug at the time and I was like, I'm just going to break it. Nobody will know.
Oh, shit.
It'll be great. And I was like, I could really go for some beer right now. And all of a sudden, the jug was full of shitloads of beer.
What?
Yeah.
Is it a never-ending beer jug?
Oh, it's not never ending. It stopped after a bit, but I got completely fucking wasted.
Is it just beer?
Is it just beer, or is it any spirit, or what?
No, I said mayonnaise, and it started to make mayonnaise, and then it stopped. So I think it like there's a finite amount of stuff it can make in a day.
Do you have a jug of mayonnaise now?
No, I ate that too.
The wee hours of the morning. There's chicken.
That was one of the best exchanges of our entire run.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Gross.
I can't stop laughing.
Oh my goodness.
So what else?
Okay, now you're gonna get a bunch of mayonnaise shipped to
Yeah.
our PO box.
No mayonnaise.
No mayonnaise. No mayonnaise.
Beer, send beer is fine.
Just an all-time classic scene. Anyway, they distribute the potions, and the party debates what to do with the book that makes you more charismatic. On the one hand, obviously, Scanlan would get the most mechanical benefit. On the other, from a story perspective, Keyleth is the one who is preparing to lead her people. Keyleth seems very reluctant to take the book. In her words, she doesn't like wanting things and leaves it for the group to decide what to do with it. But then they realize, since it can only be used once per century, Scanlan could take it now, and then Keyleth could hold on to it and read it in 100 years, since she'll be alive and well and be a leader to her people. Percy also hands off his own book that raises dexterity that'll be ready to read in 99 years. Percy also realizes that Keyleth is probably reluctant to have her rite of passage magically augmented, and she adds that she doesn't know what that book's going to teach her. Like, what sort of leader will it make her? Again, this is all just role-playing, and it fits really well with her character arc of the reluctant and uncertain leader. But also, out of character, Marisha probably knows that the character who has made it this far with 0 charisma shouldn't take the magic item that would make the bard unstoppably powerful instead. I mean, I say she's made it this far, she does get arrested a lot because her terrible charisma makes her completely unable to talk her way out of any situation, but at this point, the party's on the straight and narrow and they're trying to save the entire world, so that really shouldn't be an issue anymore going forward. As they leave the cave, at Percy's request, Keyleth uses Stone Shape to embed one of Umbrasil's teeth in the cave wall, along with Vox Machina's crest, and this phrase, "one down," in Draconic. They hike down Gat Shadow, and as they reach the base of the mountain, Matt says they see columns of smoke rising up from Westruun. The group assumes this is an attack. The dragons have already taken their vengeance, and so they rush to go protect the people. But it turns out, these are just funeral pyres. The remaining members of the Herd of Storms are burning their dead. That's a really nice way to nudge the players into focusing on the task at hand. Well done, Matt. At this moment, the fires have died down, and the Herd members have their stuff gathered up. They are getting ready to go. So it turns out they didn't just ride off into the sunset at the end of the last episode. They have hung around long enough to get to say goodbye to Grog, and burning their dead was Matt's way of justifying why they would still be hanging around. Grog tells Xanwar to pop up the cave and grab some gold, despite the other players' shocked faces since that gold is meant for the people of Westruun. But the Goliaths can't carry that much. There's only 12 of them, and they are already loaded up with their own equipment. And Grog's mind is on the Herd rebuilding the future for themselves and on Xanwar's future child. They say goodbye, and then the Herd takes off. Matt also describes that there are signs of an explosion in the Hoard and a dead body. It seems that Orrin Blackfoot, the guy who Grog freed and then snuck away, found his way to the trap and tried to take some of the gold and wound up setting off Pike's runes and blowing himself up. At this point, a few folks arrive from Westruun, some armored, some carrying sacks and goods. They've got a horse and cart with them, and they're led by a middle-aged man in chainmail. And they introduce their guest, Patrick Rothfuss, author of the Kingkiller Chronicles and co-founder of the World Builders charity. And real quick, if you're familiar with his work, go ahead and just comment where is book 3 in the comments below. Just get it out of your system now. Anyway, it seems like this is why Matt was trying to get them out of the cave and down the mountain. They had a guest star waiting to join the game. As Rothfuss sits down, Sam semi-jokingly apologizes for the wait, and Patrick says that he was laughing so loud during the Cannonball scene that the folks on Twitter had actually identified his voice, so clearly he was having a good time. So let's be clear. In this specific scenario, there's no harm, no foul. Patrick Rothfuss is not a victim because he was clearly enjoying himself regardless. There's also not really any sense that there's going to be any combat in this episode, so it's not like Patrick is champing at the bit to fight monsters and the like, and that definitely changes the expectations he might have for how he's going to spend his session playing D&D. I also really enjoyed the scenes we did get while the players were taking their long rest. I like the Cannonball Contest and the Vex Vax Keyleth interactions and the jar of mayonnaise. But let's zoom out a bit and just see what we can learn from this as players. because this is a very special circumstance, but I want to make sure that we don't learn the wrong lesson from it. Because essentially, Matt was still trying to get his players back to town quickly so he could introduce their guest, and his players weren't stalling or anything, but they certainly weren't making accommodations to help Matt introduce their guest player any quicker. This is not the first time this has happened either. Before Will Wheaton and Will Friedle had their characters introduced in their session, the other players in the group went shopping for potions because they felt like, well, this makes sense, this is what we would do. And yes, that's true, but first of all, this group also likes to roleplay every interaction they have. Like, if they were the kind of group that was okay with Matt saying, okay, cool, you buy the potions, let's cut back to the Slayer's Take, or, okay, cool, you harvest the hide and take a long rest, let's move on, then it wouldn't be an issue. But the players really enjoy role-playing every interaction because it makes the game feel more real to them. But also, and somewhat more importantly, this is just an issue of priorities. The players at this table are more focused on playing out what their characters would do than adapting what their characters would do to help get a guest player to the table faster. And while that clearly works fine for these players and this table because the guest players are usually happy to just sit and watch for a while, I think this would be a really bad habit for us to bring to our home games. I've played games with lots of guest players over the years, and I happen to believe that it is best practice to introduce the guest as quickly as possible, so the players can actually make sure they're having a chance to really play the game. And obviously, at this table, Matt has ideas for how these guest players are going to be introduced, but it's also kind of on the players to not actively get in the way of Matt's attempts to introduce these guests as quickly as they can. Like, Matt didn't realize they were going to try to do all that stuff during their long rest, and none of it individually is all that problematic, but it does add up. And they didn't have to do all of this before the guests showed up. Again, it's not a huge issue at this table, but I just cannot recommend that you or your fellow players act this casually with your guest players' times at your own table, because it would be enormously disrespectful. Anyway, returning to the game, Rothfuss is playing somebody named Kerrek, aka Care. He's a paladin and he's only level 5, while the rest of the cast is around level 13 or 14. So once again, that is a clear sign that he's not expecting to get into any combat in this session. When asked about this later, Matt basically said that he thought it was just unrealistic for every other adventurer the party meets to all be the same level as them. It would also beg the question for why there would be a level 13 paladin in town who just wasn't doing anything about the Goliaths or the dragon. As Kerrek introduces himself, he makes it clear that he isn't a current adventurer. He was a retired adventurer who had settled down in Westruun, and aside from just being a funny connection to his books, which are also about a retired adventurer, this helps explain why he can be a guest in this episode when they're in a town where there were no other adventurers helping out, because he was still low level when he retired. So they can justify it by explaining that he was involved in his community, but not powerful enough to face Kevdak or Umbrasyl. In truth, Patrick Rothfuss just doesn't live locally, but he was visiting Geek and Sundry. He'd actually been there before and watched the Killbox episode live from the studio, and so this time when he was in town, they brought him into the game. But since the party was in Westruun, they had to explain why he wasn't involved in any of these epic fights, and I think this explanation really works. But this approach of explaining Care as a former adventurer really informs his role-playing in a terrific way. As he meets the party, he turns to Matt and says, "How old do they look? They're like puppies, right? They're like kids." And Matt confirms, yeah, they've seen some shit, but they look a lot younger. And that sense of perspective is going to play a role as the episode continues. Anyway, Care was coming out here to see what had happened with the dragon, but now he tells the party that there are still some survivors in town who didn't evacuate, and they're just trying to decide whether to rebuild or abandon Westruun.
Well, look, I would just like to put this forward, right? Westruun's their home. It's Pike's home, it's my home. And if you start running, you never really stop.
Well, where are they going to stay? I've been down to the sewers, and there's crazy giant creatures down there.
Well, you could treat it like a weather shelter. Like, if the dragons come, we set up an early warning system, they go underground. But this is their home.
Here's an interesting thing to contemplate about this whole problem, is that we have 3 dragons still at large.
Yes.
3 dragons who have probably found cities of their own. So the chances that they're going to come back and take time away from their own city to go look at one that's in theory already taking over is very thin. And if they are traveling, then they're going to travel to cities that haven't been plundered yet.
That's true. This one has been plundered.
This is no less or more. There's a risk either way. It's just the risk of running or the risk of staying.
Also, the dragons know that the last dragon who came here died.
That's why I think the dragons' motives have probably shifted by now, and where the dragons might not be interested in plunder anymore, instead might be interested in any city that we are in.
They end up deciding to ask the people of the town what they want to do. They can obviously help the people relocate, or they can try to help Westruun set up fortifications in case the dragons come back for vengeance, but ultimately, it'll be the civilians' choice. Kerrek sends the rest of his companions from the town up the mountain to start collecting the gold, and then he brings the party back to town and throws them a party to honor them as dragon slayers. Vex actually hangs out outside, keeping her eyes on the skies, and Matt has her roll perception. In response to her rolling a 32, Matt gives some narration. And again, this is a great moment that I can't recommend you do at your own tables.
You look about the sky, it is clear. The dark clouds that had loomed towards the top of Gat Shadow have since blown away. The starry night sky now spreads infinitely above you. And for the first time in a long time, knowing that the immediate danger is no longer chasing you, you take a minute to appreciate the sheer beauty of the view that Westruun always had. And this brief moment to allow yourself to exhale helps remind you really what all this is worth and the importance of moments like this. You can hear the laughter behind you within the inn. You can hear the music. You can hear the kids chuckling and telling jokes, people clinking glasses together. And in this tiny little microcosm of a moment here, you let yourself silently smile and really know what all of this is worth.
Now again, this scene works. Nobody needs me to tell them that Matt Mercer is good at narrating, and what he's describing is really powerful as a moment. And if you look at Laura's face, it clearly works on her. She's emotionally moved by this sequence. But I don't know about you, but when I watch this, I just get the feeling that I would not want a GM to tell me how my character feels about something. And to help illustrate that point, I want to scan back to the moment when Vax put on his boots.
I carved a pretty little heart on the side of one of the boots just to make it extra girly.
Make a perception check.
I would just think that meant you loved me.
Maybe I do.
39.
What?
17 plus perception is... Did I get it wrong? Am I too tired? I've had a long day, people. So is 29? Let's say 29. 17.
Would you take perception as one of your...
Yeah.
Oh, then yeah, okay. You take the boots and you put them on, and immediately there's a heart there, and you're like, that probably means she loves me.
Like it.
No, I like it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't
At
know
first
what
you're like,
thinking.
no,
It's
it's good.
beautiful.
Matt tries to yes and tell Liam how Vax feels about when he sees the heart on the boot, but Liam doesn't agree with that interpretation. To him, seeing the heart doesn't mean that he has any sort of begrudging feelings or any hesitancy about coming to terms with it. He just thinks it's a nice gesture from his sister. And I think that's the danger of telling a player how their character feels about something. You don't know if you're going to be on the same page as that player. To me, the only difference between these two moments is that Matt just happened to guess right about how Laura would respond to his narration. And this is why I really recommend you do not do this. It's one thing to tell a player what their character sees and feels, and even what memories come to mind, especially when they're rolling knowledge checks or whether you're trying to give them some important exposition. But telling them what their emotional reaction is to the events of the game, I think that's beyond the purview of the game master. Matt doesn't do it very often, and I do think of this as one of, if not the most overt example of it, but I definitely wouldn't recommend that you try this at home. Now, at this point in the game, it seems like Percy was just about to go outside and maybe have an intimate scene with Vex, but Keyleth jumps in and grabs Percy and basically is having a minor panic attack about being treated as heroes. She keeps repeating things like, "We're not heroes, we're terrible people, I feel like I was cursed, I don't want any of this." Kerr spots this and comes over, and he and Keyleth step outside as Vex comes back inside, and Kerr asks Keyleth a pointed question.
Is it the people, or is it the fact that you have finally realized how pointless it all is?
Maybe it's the fact that I feel like I've been lied to my entire goddamn life and it's all crashing down upon me right now.
And here I think we get to the emotional center of the episode. Kerr understands Keyleth. And this is not a long scene, but they cover a lot of ground in a very small amount of time, so I'm probably going to play this whole clip out.
How did you deal with it?
I found other places where I could do good things.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what?
Like, I make wagon couples.
Oh.
The thing that hooks,
I don't know exactly what you said.
You have a wagon.
Sure.
And then you have a horse.
You're right, yeah.
And then something needs to hook the horse to the wagon.
Gotcha.
And if you have a bad one of those, it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And so people need good ones of those. I'm guessing that you are bothered by the fact that no matter what you do, you seem to end up destroying more things than you fix.
Yes! Jeez, you're like the first person. No one else
They
gets
don't get it, do
No,
they?
they don't.
No.
Is that it? That's it? We will destroy everything we touch. We will cause more harm than good. We will carve a path of destruction and make it seem like we're doing good, and then people will worship us because they think we're heroes, when in the back of my head I'm thinking about all the death that has come by our hands.
That can be a lot of it. I'm not going to lie to you about that.
Yeah, you know, Kerrek, you're not really, helping, making me feel better about this. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I imagine that your friends will tell you a lot of things that would make you feel real good. I'm not one for short-term solutions. I think that you're right, and I think that you've obviously put a lot of thought into this. You know, your friend, who lived here for a while. The big one, what's his name?
Oh, Grog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He doesn't have this.
Yeah.
He has the opposite of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good for him, right?
Uh-huh.
And you're kind of jealous, aren't you?
I so badly wish I could have what he has.
Yeah. But somebody has to look at the big picture. And sometimes that's us. And usually it's unpleasant. But somebody needs to do it.
So you're saying this is my curse, this is my duty?
I'm saying that if you aren't careful, it will rip you apart from the inside. But that's not a long-term solution. That's just another piece of destruction. You need to find a way to live with the fact that you do what you can, because that's what you can control. And sometimes bad things happen anyway. And so you just pick your hill. You find your hill. Everybody gets one hill, and then you plant your flag and you can die on that one, but you have to be careful, because you only get one. If you're really unlucky, you get more than one.
And what if the ultimate problem is that I feel like I have had zero control from the start, since birth? I didn't want any of this. I didn't want my abilities.
No.
I didn't know I was special.
Oh.
Until now. And I so desperately just want to be normal.
Then I do have a momentary, short-term solution for you.
Shoot.
It's actually there, and I will get you
really?
another one. Yep.
Yeah, totally.
And it will help a little bit for now. It'll smooth out some of the rough edges.
All right.
Long enough for us to talk for a while, because I've been down this road. Okay? And the thing is, you're not wrong, and you're not crazy, but it's not hopeless either.
Okay.
Now, this is not a scene I really understood when I first watched this episode. It's still a tough scene for me to follow because neither Keyleth nor Kerrek really explain what they mean in great detail. I mean, why would they? They understand each other well. They know what they're talking about, so any explanation would just be for the benefit of the audience, and that just wasn't where their heads were at in this moment. We're also still quite a ways out from the cast having a show like Vox Machina or Four-Sided Dive, where the players have a chance to voice their thoughts about the episode and answer questions. So all I can do is give you my interpretation, which comes from rewatching the campaign up to this point, and knowing that the scene was coming, and looking for context to help clarify it along the way. Because in a way, this goes all the way back to episode 9, back in the Underdark, when Keyleth tearfully asked the other party members how they knew they were the good guys when all they did was kill people. Sure, the people they killed were bad. The Duergar and the Mind Flayers were preparing to make war against Craghammer, and they were essentially being mind-controlled by an unknown, malevolent force. But as she said in that episode, lots of people have murdered lots of other people and claimed that they were justified in doing so. There's always a reason, but does that make it right? This conversation with Kerrek also brings to mind moments from the Briarwood arc, where Keyleth was the first to express concerns about the fact that they're not just doing a rebellion, but that they were actively being sadistic. With that context, and with some of the phrasing in this episode, it seems to me like Keyleth is struggling with the fact that she's a D&D adventurer. She exists in a story where the solution to almost every conflict they have is violence. And so it's strange for Keyleth to be called a hero because as far as she's concerned, all they've done is kill, and they're getting the praise as if they've done great deeds when all they've done is destroy things. And I have some connection to this sort of character arc. I've played a Dragonborn cleric once who had a very similar moral issue. He was a peaceful character who was also on a D&D adventure, so of course, he and his friends solved a lot of their problems with violence. And I distinctly remember when the GM asked us individually what our characters' greatest fears were, my character was afraid that he was getting too comfortable with how casually they were just doing a bunch of murders, and how he felt like he was losing a part of himself. Sure, Vox Machina is being treated like they're a bunch of superheroes, but, you know, they did make 2 whole Avengers movies about how superheroes only seek to reinforce the status quo, and all they do is destroy things and walk away, and their only true moments of triumph actually come when they put their energy into actively protecting civilians. And then there's the fact that Keyleth is basically being discussed as the only one who sees the big picture. And while I think that's a bit oversimplified, like, you know, that's Kerrek's summary based on what he's seen of the party in this episode, there's definitely a kernel of truth to it. Sure, Vax and Vex and Percy and Scanlan frequently try to zoom out and look at the big picture, but they've got different priorities from Keyleth. During the Briarwood arc, the other party members wanted to take the long rest, and she was the only one who was thinking about the rebels and making sure that Vox Machina didn't just get them all killed for no reason by resting as the townsfolk rose up and fought for them. Even when they were getting ready to meet with Xanror at dawn here in Westruun, Keyleth was the only one who was willing to entertain the concept that the Goliaths might be evil, but that they could still be redeemed. Something that, in the long run, she wound up being correct about. But so often when she presents these issues, she's felt like she's been talking to a wall. She tried to bring up the sadistic nature of Vox Machina's kills after the Your Soul is Forfeit fight, and she tried to warn them about taking things too far, but the conversation ultimately led nowhere, until finally the party had to confront it in Whitestone when things actually had gone too far. In so many other similar scenes, the party says things like, yeah, okay, we can work on that, or we can't help that we have to kill all these people, but we do hear you, but then nothing will change. Keyleth is essentially in conflict with 4 decades worth of D&D mechanics and storytelling traditions, and it's really difficult for this trope-heavy campaign to suddenly become about choosing non-violence when they're currently facing off against 4 of the worst mass-murdering monsters in the history of Exandria. Or when they're dealing with a vampire and a necromancer who are trying to summon a lich god and who are clearly willing to murder children. Or when they're trying to halt an invasion from eldritch monsters upon the surface world. And so on, and so on. And of course, none of this even begins to tackle the topic of unintended consequences, like when they riled up a gang of mind flayers and then just left Craghammer to deal with it, and hope that the mind flayers didn't seek revengeance. Or when Whitestone was saved, but a whole bunch of people died in the process fighting their rebellion. Or when she thought that they had summoned the dragons by revisiting General Krieg's house. Or, hey, going back to the pre-stream game, when Keyleth accidentally killed a child. Yet, now, here comes Kerrek, confirming that, yes, the world of D&D is inherently violent, and it's okay for the player characters to have some complicated moral feelings about that, and to help Keyleth see the perspective that it's okay to still participate in that system by, you know, going through the Dungeon Master's adventure and allowing for the fact that you're going to do your best, but you can't control whether there will be unforeseen consequences. All you can do, all anyone can do, is their best. And if you're someone like Keyleth who is making an effort to think about the impact Vox Machina is having with their adventures, then Kerr is basically telling her that, yeah, that's enough. It has to be. Because if it's not, then you'll drive yourself crazy. Because your efforts to essentially be an ethical adventurer will always be undercut by the GM's next plot twist, because there will always be unforeseen consequences. Additionally, this is one of the few times where we see Keyleth being treated as a chosen one, with a fairly typical struggle. She never asked to be special, and she doesn't want all this burden. Obviously, that's not true about Marisha. She created Keyleth to be a chosen one because she wanted to explore what it might actually feel like to be reluctant to accept that burden. It's an old trope, but it's still fun to play out in the long-form campaign. And Kerr can't speak to the chosen one aspect, but he can speak to the pressure Keyleth feels to be the respectable one, the responsible one. Of course, this is a scene that probably has a ton of different ways to interpret it, so if you've got a totally different reading on it, then let me know in the comments below. How do you read this scene? Do you have a different interpretation from mine? Anyway, Vex and Pike find Amelia, the daughter of Reginald the farmer, and tell her that Reginald died, but that he was a hero. Grog hands her a bunch of gold and claims Reginald had been hiding it. After that, they take their break, and Matt fast-forwards through the next morning, and we discover that Vax stayed out in the field by Reginald's body all night, expecting someone to come out to take it. Everyone else thought that he was bringing Reginald's body back, but he just wound up staying in the field and sleeping there. Besides, he just said he needed some space. Scanlan retcons that he asked Kerr to build a small compartment into the sheath of his sword, not Mythcarver, a different sword. He also checks in on Greyskull Keep through his poop scry, and they see some fresh dishes in the sink, so someone's currently living there. They finally call for a town meeting, and they're going to leave it to the town to decide what they want to do. Stay or flee. Percy feels that the death of a city is horrible, but Keyleth points out that the city is nothing without the people living in it, and they have to be the priority. Plus, Keyleth thinks the dragons will definitely return, but Percy doesn't agree. And in truth, they just don't know. The group asks Pike to speak up and talk to the townsfolk, which is a really nice way to give Ashley some time in the spotlight, since she hasn't gotten as much to do in this game. And so they ask the townsfolk, stay and build underground shelters in case the dragons return, and send people to retrieve the refugees from Kymel, or flee and leave Westruun behind. A man stands up and says he wants to go to Kymel and gather some like-minded folks who don't want to live in a city in ruins with painful memories everywhere. Then a woman gets up, someone who clearly had a lot of money and or status before the world ended, and she does not want to leave her family's history behind, nor does she want her stuff taken by the next gang of ruffians to move through. And Percy gets up to speak as well.
The terrible woman may have a point.
Thank you. What?
Percy says they'll help build an underground haven for those who stay, and they'll set up a trust that will fairly distribute the Hoard to all the people.
And it will not go to titles. If you're properly titled, you'll have money elsewhere, and you'll figure it out.
You hear a...
New money.
His speech convinces the people not to flee the city, but instead to focus on getting the word out to their loved ones that they can safely return to Westruun. Keyleth gets up and helps speak to the concerns of the people who just want to look out for their loved ones, since that is also very much her concern. Kerrek, Scanlan, and Pike will take off to go bring these people back from Kymel, something that Scanlan is very keen to do since that's where Kaylee is. Vax takes Amelia to Reginald's body and they lay him to rest next to his farmhouse. Vox Machina cleans out the monsters in the sewer, which Matt hand waves away since the party is high enough level that they won't be in any real danger at all down there. Then they fortify the sewers and they flow the waste away to create tunnels that people can actually live in. Percy carves some images in the walls, the names of the survivors, and the history of the city. And Keyleth doesn't understand why he's doing it, and so we get maybe my favorite Percy and Keyleth interaction in the entire series, of which there are many, but I love this one.
How long do you live?
If I complete my journey, it could be upwards of 1,000 years or more.
How long do you think I live?
Less than 100, if you're lucky.
No.
How long?
I am Percival Frederick Stein von Musel Kowalski de Rolla III.
No kidding.
My ancestry dates back thousands of years and will continue for thousands more, unless Whitestone falls. I live as long as Whitestone lives. This place is the human soul. This is what we have built with our tiny moments. To lose a place like this, we don't feel it immediately, but it would ruin everyone in small ways.
Not all of us are lucky enough to have a lineage in a name.
Not all of us are lucky enough to have a lineage and a lifespan.
Not enough. Not many of us are lucky enough to have a lineage at all.
Which is why we save everyone we can.
I guess that is one thing we can both agree on.
This is good we do here. This is great good. And it's not about idolizing ourselves, it's about a very long story, which we are, even you, a tiny part of.
At this moment, you look down and notice that while you guys are having this talk, a small child has walked up to the wall, and where Percy has stopped the carving, the child has picked up a piece of wayward chalk that was in the ground and has begun to draw little stick figures in the wall where he stopped. And then, and with a little bit of the quiet, stops and looks up over his shoulder at the two of you and just smiles. And then just goes back to writing on the wall.
He'll outlive you right there.
Yeah, no, you're probably right.
Keyleth teleports Kerr, Scanlan, and Pike to Kymel, and then they go and start gathering the refugees and gathering provisions to bring everyone back to Westruun. Scanlan drinks his scrying potion and poops out a little blue turd and puts a little bit of it in some paper and hides it in the sword compartment. He then goes to find Kaylee, and he says that he'll be whatever father she wants if he survives these dragon fights. She makes him promise not to die. He can go off and fight the dragons, but don't die. And he gives her the ring. It was never from Pike. It was always a gift for Kaylee. He also gives her this singing dawn blade, which is the sword with the little bit of scrying poop in the hilt. Now, unbeknownst to her, he'll always be able to tell where she is. Once back in Westruun, Kerr and Keyleth talk a little bit more, though it's handled in the abstract. Just general advice about how the building of things takes time and patience. Vox Machina gives Kerr the headband to control Fastbender and a friendship bracelet that Keyleth made. And then Matt brings the whole thing home.
As you step away and turn back to the wall, which is mostly done carving with the names and the story bits you, Percy, have been working on during this time, that child has returned and is still drawing with the chalk. And as you look down at the stick figures, you can see one with antlers, two that are smaller than the others, one that is larger than the rest, burlier, thicker around the chest, one that you can barely see, and one that flies across them all on a broom. And then at the very end, just finishing one with funny glasses. And the kid just stands up and looks on it once and goes, "It's done," and then runs off.
That's kind of amazing.
Oh dear.
I just take a little piece of chalk and I add trinket right on the list.
Much better drawn than the rest of them.
Almost perfect.
As they wind down, Matt asks the players where they want to go next, and Vax says he has to go to Vasselheim. He's being vague, but everyone gets it. He needs to go meet with the Raven Queen. He wants Pike and Keyleth with him, and he doesn't want Vex anywhere near the Raven Queen's temple. Pike and Vax step aside to talk. He's been avoiding her because, to be truthful, he was planning on learning from Pike and devoting himself to Sarenrae before everything happened with the Raven Queen. This is actually true. Liam was planning to multiclass. We also learn in this episode that Vax seems to believe that if he walks away from the Raven Queen, that means Vex will just drop dead. So he can't walk away. Side note, that's probably also why he doesn't want Vex to come with him when he goes to see the Raven Queen. He wants her very far from that temple. Pike assures Vax that they have his back in case the Raven Queen doesn't treat him right. Keyleth opens a tree, and they all cross through and travel to Vasselheim. And that is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss episode 57, Dusk Meadow. This is where we get a really cool come to Jesus moment with the Raven Queen, plus a bit more downtime/prep as the party takes steps to get ready for the next leg of their journey. But between now and then, we're going to do a few videos that are directly tied into some of the stuff in this episode. Because believe it or not, there was somehow even more for me to discuss that did not make it into this extremely long video. And I think you're really going to enjoy those videos, so make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you can be notified about them as soon as they come out. If you want to support me financially, there are a few ways you can do that. You can consider checking out my Patreon, my YouTube memberships, or my Ko-fi. Join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people, and sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date with all my latest updates. Click here to check out a video that I made about a whole bunch of awesome 5e adventures you should consider dropping into your own game. Until next time, play fair and have fun.